How's it going, guys? Welcome back to Recon Wildlands. This is part 2 of my Delta Force loadout. One thing I did forget to mention in part 1 is that Nomad, the main character, at least the default main character, of course you can come up with whatever backstory you want, the default Nomad in this game is actually former Delta Force. As well. So, these loadouts actually kind of have a little bit of a backstory, per se, to some of the stuff that Nomad might have used. Now, I do believe that, what's his name, Weaver, I do believe is supposed to be a former SEAL. He's running off for some weird reason. But anyway, getting back to the main portion of the video here, I did mention that we were going to be delving into more loadouts in this video. Some other weapons and camouflage patterns, for instance, that Delta Force does use is, for instance, another type of loadout that they would use in this type of area would be DCU tricolor for the vest and the pants and all that good stuff. We're gonna keep the boots. Ballistic M-frames look good. Of course, you want to change the helmet. Don't want anything mix-matched here. And then, yet again, I'm going to be going with that standard issue backpack. And that's essentially the type of loadout that a Delta Force operative would have. In this instance, we're actually going to go with a light machine gun as our primary weapon here. Now, for light machine guns in real life, Delta Force does use the Mark 48, and they also use the Mark 249. Now, everything else in this game doesn't really do them justice too much. Now, for special operations purposes, the Stoner light machine gun could be a good replacement. We are going to go with the holographic. I love that optic. The standard 5.56 ammo box should be fine. The foregrip ATPIL sight, and we'll go with the standard barrel. And of course, you can mount a suppressor on this thing. It is a very, very it's actually a very light weapon in real life. And we are going to go with a desert tan kind of camouflage pattern to it, or a paint job per se, and of course get all that suppressed and good to go. And then we will actually swap to that weapon. It is a very long weapon, but it is also very light. I'm not sure whether there's a shorter barrel. Nope, there is not a shorter barrel. That is the shortest you can actually make this weapon, as far as I'm aware, unless you fold the buttstock, which I suppose you could do, but it looks a little odd, to say the least. On a light machine gun, you would definitely want an extended buttstock, because there's going to be a lot of recoil coming back into your shoulder. In terms of a backup weapon, I suppose we're going to make this guy a breacher per se. He is going to have a super shorty as a backup weapon. And this is going to be a breaching shotgun, more or less. And it will have the... Not really a point in getting the longer barrel. In real life, you would want as short of a shotgun as possible if you're planning on breaching into stuff. So we'll go with a tan weapon with a tan barrel as well. For handguns, again, I'm probably going to have to stick with the P12. There's just really not... I mean, I suppose I could go with the P45T just to kind of show you guys what it looks like. I'm pretty sure most of you are aware what it looks like, considering it's the starter gun that you actually end up with. Go ahead and put an ATPIL sight on it, and we'll go ahead and make it desert tan. That looks pretty good. Okay, and this is essentially yet another loadout that you could go with. Again, this gun is very, very big. And another problem I do have with the Stoner is that the optic is very in your face. The way that they mount this optic, due to the upper rail system, there's actually not very much room to actually mount that optic on there. So as a result, your optic is very, very close to your face, which I personally don't like. Now in real life, it's different, but in game, I don't personally prefer that. Now, this is the P45T. As I said, I'm pretty sure all you guys are aware of this, how this gun looks. It's pretty good, it's not too bad. Not really a huge fan of the sights. They definitely could be better. But overall, it's a good solid firearm. Then of course you have the LMG, and then of course you have the Super Shorty, which, you know, in all honesty, is literally just a breaching shotgun. I'm assuming that Ubisoft planned on creating the shotgun to be used for breaching, but I guess they took the breaching mechanic more or less out of the game or something, and this is one of the most useless shotguns in the game. There's really not too much you can actually do with this shotgun. Unfortunately. Okay, now let's go with more of a loud loadout, I suppose. A louder loadout, I suppose, you could use the Mark 48 if you're planning on being in the desert or an urban environment. Although I suppose 5.56 could work in an urban environment as well, especially if there are civilians around. It would probably be a better idea to get 5.56 versus 7.62 for obvious reasons. And this is the type of gear normally, or this is the type of attachments that you would normally see on this type of weapon. Modify the barrel, modify the compensator, and we are good to go. Okay. Now, for a backup weapon, I'm actually probably going to go with some kind of submachine gun. In this instance, I'm actually going to go with the Vector, but I'm going to fold the buttstock. I'm actually going to give it the micro red dot sight this time, since I didn't use the micro red dot on the MP7, just due to texture problems. I'm going to go with the short barrel, and I'm going to put a suppressor on it. This is going to be essentially my stealth go-to submachine gun in the event that I can't, for whatever reason, be very stealthy. And then we're going to go with the 5.7 for this as well. This is another weapon that you could go with, and you would be totally fine. But again, Delta Force does not use this weapon particularly a lot, simply because of the rounds that are actually loaded in the magazine there, the 5.7 round. It is designed to penetrate body armor. It would be very useful in the event that the United States got in a war with, say, Russia or China or some other developed country that actually has modernized military body armor. This is the type of round that it would essentially just go right through. That's, you know, and that would be more along the lines of a handgun that Delta would use in the event that they're going up against a modernized military. So, this is essentially, yet again, another loadout that you could go with. Another loadout that you could go with also would be something like again, you could probably use the Mark 17, especially considering the environment. The Mark 17 is very, very good in arid environments. And I do normally carry the short barrel on the Mark 17. Normally, the 75th Ranger Regiment actually carries the standard version of the barrel. The reason why I don't like the standard barrel is because it gives you a little too much length. Normally that's not a huge deal, especially, again, if you're the 75th Ranger Regiment, because you're essentially mobile infantry. Whereas for a special operations unit like this, you would want as much maneuverability as possible. So that short barrel is definitely going to help you in room clearing and things of that nature. And for this particular setup, I'm actually going to go with the tan paint, and I'm going to actually paint the entire weapon tan. That way everything blends very nicely together. I do believe the vector is still there. Now, what I could do as well, just to change things up, is, again, I could go with I could, again, go with the G28 if I wanted to. Now, another sniper rifle, the sniper rifles that Delta Force typically use, in this game, anyway, that I could actually, use properly, they do use the G28, of course. They use the SR SA1, the HTI, the Mark 14, the MSR, and I have, however, seen them use the SR1. However, I do not have that weapon unlocked. To show you guys, I haven't actually been in that region. It is a very good weapon, especially for being a compact rifle. And show you guys what it looks like. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. This is actually a German bullpup sniper rifle. It actually says right there, made in Germany. A lot of weapons that our Tier 1 military units actually use are either German weapons or they are, of course, made by American companies. In this instance, I'm going to go with the G28 again, just because it works, again, very, very well as a backup sniper rifle. And it is semi-automatic, which makes it invaluable for somebody with an assault rifle to be able to get in cover and essentially, put the AR on their back and pull out the G28 and counter snipe if you need to. For your handguns, let's change it up a little bit. Delta typically does not use the 1911. They do use more modern variants that use the 45. In this instance, though, we are going to use the 1911 just to change things up a little bit. Again, you can use this if you want. However, Delta, again, as I was saying, they typically do not go with the 1911. And this actually appears to be a heavily modified old school 1911. It looks like the only thing that was actually added to it is a rail system. There doesn't really seem to be too much other additions to this 1911. So I suppose I'm going to go with a tan weapon here. I'm going to make the barrel tan along with the suppressor. So this is yet another loadout that you could go with. But this is the main reason why I do not like the 1911. Those sights are very, very hard to see. Or at least to me they are. Especially depending on the backdrop. Some things blend in better than others. But this is very, very hard to see. And then of course you have the Mark 17. Again, this is a very, very good placement for the EOTech right here, your EOTech sight. It's a little bit midway down your weapon, and it's not right up in your face, which is very, very nice. I do not like optics that are right up in my face, and then of course the G28. Very, very sleek looking weapon. Now, other tactical gear that Delta would use in this environment. Again, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the P12 just to keep things more streamlined. I'm going to keep the Mark 17 and all that, however. For your Cry Combat shirt, Delta does use Cryptek Highlander. Tripping over my words there. So we're actually going to go ahead and go with that due to the terrain. Cryptek Highlander would make sense. I'm going to go ahead and keep the Oakleys the way that they are. I am going to go ahead and swap out my helmet here. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that standard issue backpack. Now, another backpack that you could use, depending on your role, if you're playing with other people, I personally prefer that somebody always carry a radio in my squad if I am playing with other people. So, no matter what, somebody's carrying a radio with them. But another backpack that you could use that could kind of give you a good range of mobility and the ability to essentially have a decent sized backpack on you would be the Rush 24 backpack, which is like so. In Cryptek Highlander, it is a very good overall. The camouflage pattern is very, very good. It works very well. Now, I have seen some tier 1 units do this. However, it is not very common. It depends on the level of, it more or less depends on what the units in question actually want to do. In this instance, I'm actually going to go ahead and camouflage my weapon. I'm going to give it a Cryptek Highlander camouflage pattern as well, along with the G28. I'm also going to give it the Cryptek Highlander pattern. Again, this is stuff I unlocked through community challenges. I do believe that you can get Cryptek Highlander right now. If you buy it in store, I think it's one of the packs that you buy. And this is more or less another loadout that you could look at. Again, this blends in very well given the environment. And of course, you know, this is, again, one of the many camouflage patterns that Delta uses. Now, other stuff that they use, of course, would be your multicam. Regular multicam, Delta uses quite a bit. They don't, however, use multicam arid too much. Just to give you an idea what multicam arid looks like, that is multicam arid right there. I have never seen Delta or DevGru, for that matter, use multicam arid. They normally, if it's DevGru, they normally use AOR1, or if it's Delta, they normally use one of these other patterns that I've shown, either Cryptek Highlander, DCU Tricolor, or they've used ATAX AU. ATAX camouflage patterns are very popular in the Special Forces community in the US military. I do believe Russia actually uses variants of ATAX as well, which is odd, considering ATAX is made in the United States, but I digress. Now, of course, for a more woodland area, Delta could, of course, they could either use multicam, they could go with ATAX Foliage Green. I've also seen them use the old 3-color woodland. Cryptek Mandrake, of course, would work, depending on the woodland in question. Cryptek Mandrake is more or less designed for jungle than woodland. And then, of course, you could use multicam Tropic. Now, I have seen Delta use multicam Tropic. It was during a special operations mission in South America. A couple years ago, there were some pictures taken of them that had their faces blurred out, and they appeared to be wearing multicam Tropic in their raid gear. And in terms of anything else, I do believe that's really the most that that Delta really wears. Delta really has no need to really wear any of this. I mean, unless they're planning on raiding a boat, of course. Now, I have seen, in terms of their Arctic training, I have seen them wear Cryptek Yeti, Multicam Alpine, and ATAX ATX. I've seen them wear all of those camouflage patterns. One of the only... Now, for nighttime operations, Delta would probably either wear Sleek Black, like this, Cryptek Typhon, or Multicam Black. Just as DevGru does. Now, if it's for urban operations, because I am aware that Delta Force is one of the few military units that's capable of operating domestically. They are allowed to do so in the event of a crisis situation. More than likely, they would probably wear something like ATAX LE or something like that, depending on the environment, of course. For urban operations, I have seen I have seen Delta Force use Cryptek Raid, and back in the day, they used UCP. They actually used a variant of UCP known as UCP Delta, but lately I have not seen Delta Force, even in training, use UCP. Now, that being said, this essentially finishes up the video, more or less. I mean, there are a few things that I could do to kind of give you guys a better idea of, say, how about a Delta Force sniper? Now, of course, a Delta Force sniper is going to be it's not going to be very difficult to replicate here. I guess for a desert environment, what I could do is I could get, let's see, let's do Cryptek Highlander. We'll do Cryptek Highlander all over the place here. We'll do ghillie leaves, or my bad, ghillie strands. And then we'll do the commando boots in sandstone. And I do not want to go with the, I actually want to go with the sandstone ghillie leaves, or ghillie strands. I keep messing that up, don't know why, but I do. And I'm going to go with the sandstone bandana. The reason why is fairly obvious. As a sniper, you want to minimize the outline of your face as much as possible, just to give the enemy a little less visual representation of, you know, what part of your body they're basically looking at. And then for the backpack, I will wear Cryptek Highlander right there. Now, for a sniper loadout, this is going to be slightly different. I'm actually going to grab a weapon that I have seen Delta use quite a bit is the XR635. This is typically a urban combat weapon. However, in this instance, it is going to be a backup weapon for our sniper. Now, in this game, for personal preferences, I do not like using the, I don't like using a sniper rifle as my primary weapon unless I'm using a large caliber sniper rifle. The reason being is because the rifle, the ammunition you actually carry on your vest is not the same as the weapon you're carrying half the time. The only way it would actually work is in the event that you were shooting the 338 Lapua cartridge or the 50 caliber cartridge from the HTI. So for this instance, as I said, we're going to go with the SR635. I am going to go ahead and keep the standard barrel, and I'm going to keep the suppressor on it for obvious reasons. We are going to camouflage this for obvious reasons. For the camouflage patterns, I suppose what I could do is I could make it camouflaged along with the rest of my gear here and go with Cryptek Highlander. For sniper rifles, I'm actually going to go with a Let's go with something nice and simple here. Let's go with the... There's not really too many, bolt-action sniper rifles that you could actually go with here. And I don't want to go with the L11 or the L115A3, because that is not necessarily used by US forces. What I could use for desert combat is I could use the M40A5. I suppose it is somewhat believable, I suppose, that Delta Force could use this variant. I'm going to go ahead and put a long barrel on it, and I'm going to put a suppressor on it. And for the paint job, of course, I'm going to go with the Cryptek Highlander, just to kind of match the generalized theme I'm going with here. And then for my handgun, I'm going to keep Cryptek Highlander on it as well. So this is essentially the loadout for a desert sniper. I do prefer ghillie leaves in this particular instance, or ghillie strands. I'm gonna keep messing that up. It's gonna keep happening. There's but the reason why I prefer ghillie strands, see what I'm saying? I'll mess it up again and again. But I do prefer ghillie strands simply because at long distance, ghillie strands, the idea is that it breaks up your shape. So if I'm sitting up here, for instance, if somebody is way down there, say on that road down there, and they're looking, trying to figure out where I'm shooting from, the chance of them being able to see me, unless they're looking directly at me, is slim to none. Mainly because my shape has been distorted. And that's the idea of camouflage, is distortion, distorting your shape. Because if you don't look like a human being, the human eye is going to essentially just, you know, bypass it. And someone could be looking directly at you, not look at you long enough, not look at you at a certain angle, and they're going to completely miss you, and they're going to look somewhere else, and the same area that they just looked at is an area where you're looking at, or, you know, is an area where you are, and you can take them out very easily. Again, you can obviously, another loadout that you could do, of course, is you could go with if you're going with more of long-range shooting, you can go with the MSR as your primary. That is going to swap out my vest. And again, what I could do is I could put, I'm going to go with Cryptek Highlander, just because I really like the Cryptek patterns. I like the snakeskin look of them. I'm actually going to go ahead and keep the SR635. And as you can see, it changed our vest right here. And our vest now has large caliber rifle ammunition on it. Now, this is my one problem with equipping sniper rifles as my primary. Typically, unless it's a large caliber rifle, I do not equip a sniper rifle as my primary. And that is the reason why. Now, if you can see in here in the magazine, it's not exactly the same as the ammunition that's actually stored on the vest, but it's somewhat, the bullets look somewhat similar. Now, the bullets that are actually on the individual's vest is bullets from the HTI, the 50 caliber round. These are, again, this is a very effective rifle as well. It's also very long, so you're going to have issues with clipping in the game. But again, it is a very effective rifle, and if we come over here to the magazine, you can see the big 50 caliber rounds. These things are massive. In the Fallen Ghost DLC, there's actually a Barrett M82, which is a older variant of the Barrett M107, which is currently used by most U.S. forces. I actually think they use the Barrett M107A1 and the AS-50 sniper rifle. As you can see, this rifle is absolutely massive, and if you look at the vest, those are either 338 or 50 caliber rounds. So you could make the argument that either one of those would work. That is why I like using either the... I would prefer to use a rifle that essentially would use the 338 over the 7.62. Any 7.62 rifles in this game I don't prefer using as my primary, simply because it changes the vest and it makes it look very, very off due to those rifle rounds. Now, again, another loadout you could actually go with in terms of more of a support sniper type of role is, let's go over here, go to our loadouts. We'll go to set 2. I do believe that's it. Yeah, there we go. You could go to set 2, and we could swap this out to the Mark 14. Actually, I don't want that as my primary. I take that back. We could actually go with the... As a primary weapon, we could go... Let's see. Let's go with more or less a short carbine here. We'll go with the M4A1. And we will go with the Cryptek Highlander as soon as I find it here. Cryptek Mandrake's in here as well. But they're in interesting locations. They're not exactly where I remember them. Let's see. There's Cryptek Highlander. And we're going to go over here to the Mark 14. Now, you can either go with the extended buttstock or the stock buttstock. I personally prefer the stock buttstock. It seems like the type of buttstock that would be much more comfortable. I have used an M4 buttstock before, and they are fairly comfortable. Now, for this, you can... It all depends on what you'd like to use. Personally, the trigger that I use is the semi-automatic or the burst fire trigger. I'm not a huge fan of the fully auto / semi-auto trigger. Not a huge fan of the fully auto or the burst fire. I prefer the semi-auto and the burst over the fully auto and the semi, simply because I prefer the accuracy buff that it gives you. Although whenever you boost your weapon stats up this high, you could go with the fully auto and semi trigger and you'd be totally fine. For the underbarrel attachment, I do prefer using the shift short angle grip, and these are essentially the type of attachments that you'd normally see a Delta Force operative actually use. And for this, again, I'm going to go with the Cryptek Highlander pattern. And I do believe I still have Cryptek Highlander on my P12. So, again, this is more of a support sniper type of role. And in the event that a squad doesn't have the G28, which the G28 has not been fielded quite as much, and or it just depends on operator preference. Some operators don't prefer the G28. They would prefer to have something like the Mark 14. Both of them are good firearms. I personally prefer the G28 myself, although, again, depending on the operation at hand, one thing you actually could do is if, you prefer a urban sniper type loadout, you could go with a G28 scope. You could actually lower this down to a standard barrel, and you could actually give yourself a foregrip instead. And you could go ahead and go with a vertical foregrip right there if you'd want. Or you could go with foregrip version 4. I personally prefer, for an urban situation myself, I would probably prefer the foregrip V4. And it's a very compact weapon. And you have either the optic right here, which is a 5x optic, or you have the red dot on top. So either way, you're very effective, regardless of the situation that you're in. And the Mark 14 is definitely a very, very customizable weapon. Much more than the G28 actually, because the G28 again is designed for you know, essentially long to mid-long range. It's not really designed for extreme long range. That's more along the lines of the HTI or more or less a bolt-action rifle. You don't want to shoot at extreme long-range distances with a semi-automatic, unless, of course, you have, say, the Barrett M107 or the Accuracy International AS50. Those are weapons that would be more or less suited for that type of job. As I said, this is essentially a basic look at the type of loadouts that Delta Force would more or less use. Now, one thing I didn't actually show you guys is the Mark 249. This is a very popular light machine gun platform in the Special Operations community. It's essentially the M27 IAR, with the exception that it has a basically a big old box mag, specifically 150 round box mag. And it is very, very effective at putting down suppressive fire. It also has a fully customizable stock. The stock in this instance is a recoil compensating stock, which is actually really, really nice considering how light and nimble this weapon actually is. That would probably help out quite a bit. And we're going to go with Cryptek Highlander again. Due to the fact that I have a light machine gun, I'm actually going to swap on over to a different submachine gun this time. What submachine gun have I not used here? Let's go with the MPX. This is another submachine gun that Delta actually uses quite a bit. I don't like using it in game simply because it doesn't have a side rail, which is a big, big no-no to me. Not really a huge fan that it doesn't have a side rail. Let's see. I do want to get the foregrip. My one problem with the MPX is that it's a little too long for its own good. To be fair, the MPX is essentially a 9mm short carbine. That's essentially the weapon classification of it. It is designed more or less to be a carbine of sorts. So the weapon is not particularly designed for being compact. I mean, it is, but at the same time, it's not as compact as, say, the Vector or another weapon like that. Now, that being said, it is still a compact weapon. It's very maneuverable. The longer variant of this weapon is the PSG. It's literally an MPX on steroids. It's the same basic type of weapon, except it is in a M4 platform this time. And this is more or less it's basically a carbine that shoots pistol cartridges. And it is a very effective weapon. This is the type of weapon that you would normally see Delta Force members and DevGru, for instance, and Marine Raiders. Quite a few individuals use this weapon. And it is very effective at putting down targets at both short range and medium range, or short to medium range, more or less. Short, medium distance. That's what I'm trying to say. and it is very effective at what it does. It's not quite as effective, of course, as putting somebody down in CQB as, say, a larger round, say a 45, but again, it is still very effective, and the rate of fire makes up for the lack of stopping power. Now, that being said, the rate of fire more or less is going to put your targets down fairly quickly. Then again, the vector shoots way faster than the PSG, so that's something to take in mind as well. So overall, this has essentially been a more or less an in-depth look at the type of loadouts that you could do. In more of a woodland area, like I said, something with ATAX foliage green would work fairly well. So, basically this is essentially a building block of the same type of loadout that you would want. Really, too much isn't going to change in terms of this type of gear. Again, a good woodland type of camouflage pattern would, of course, be ATAX foliage green, or the 3-color woodland, which is right here. Both of these would work fairly well if you use those. And those are essentially my go-to patterns when I actually, use this type of equipment in game. So this is going to be ending part 2. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will attempt to bring you guys possibly a part 3 if you guys would like me to do it. I think that I've covered the basics more or less of the type of loadout that you would want to go with if you're trying to imitate a modernized variant of Delta Force. Of course, there are different civilian variants that you can go with. You can essentially go with whatever you'd like in terms of civilian variants, and it would be fairly accurate to what Delta Force uses, simply because the idea of looking like a civilian is you're not supposed to be uniform. Everything is supposed to be more or less mixed matched, and you're supposed to essentially blend into the environment and not stand out. And by blending in, I don't mean as in camouflage, but more or less, to make yourself look ambiguous. People are going to know you're there, but they're not going to essentially know where you came from or what unit you belong to. For instance, if I deck my character out right now in a civilian loadout, you're not going to have any idea whether he's from the United States, whether he's from Germany. The only thing that you're going to be able to tell is the guy is Caucasian, and he essentially more or less looks like a contractor, which in today's day and age, contractors look very similar to this. Now, of course, minus the camouflaged weapons, of course. Again, that would have to be something that would be rectified by the operators themselves. They would probably go with more of a solid paint job on their weapons, just to kind of, make themselves be a little lower profile. But again, this is essentially the best I can do in terms of giving you guys an idea of essentially the type of gear that Delta Force uses in modern times. So, I hope you guys enjoyed these 2 videos. I'm going to wrap this series up here. I might do future loadout videos. I might also do videos related to milsim type of stuff in the future. It all depends on how much feedback these videos get, and if people would be interested in seeing that. It will also probably depend on my mood, as well as how my internet's doing that day, because my internet speeds lately have not been particularly good, and videos like this are very, very hard for me to upload. So, but again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys later.